Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark DiCarlo. This is the voice of the Coastal Bend. We've been doing this show about 10 years. Tonight, my guest is Mr. Homer Villarreal, who's had a local newspaper, a community activist. Tonight, we wanted him to come on the show, and I call it jokingly, the Eve of Destruction tour. We're in the city wants to destroy, or the Wrecking Ball tour. They want to um, basically destroy or tear down Christus Spahn Memorial Hospital. They want to destroy two of the three ships of the Columbus fleet, and then the parks, 22 parks. They want to actually destroy those also, and then give them to a developer allegedly with incentives to build reasonably priced housing. So let's start with Christus Spahn Memorial Hospital. Mr. Villarreal, thanks for coming on. What's your take on this issue of the destruction of Christus Spahn Memorial Hospital?
Quickly, the movements, all of a sudden we hear the Corpus Christi Color Times announce that they weren't aware that a movement was going on by Christy Spahn to tear down the Memorial Hospital, which houses a 360-bed facility, a trauma center, a residency program for doctors, as well as the emergency room training that they do, as well as deal with psychiatric patients, so on and so forth. They said that they sort of forced the executive director, Ms. Pam Robinson, the CEO, currently the new CEO of Spahn Memorial, which is an international Catholic hospital, by the way, that they sort of forced her into announcing a master plan, which they had for tearing down. But this is it has had shocking ripples throughout the community. This massive rock falling on the water, and you're seeing the ripples just violently sending tenebrific thoughts through people's minds. Because here you have a whole ecosystem, and the Color Times was wrong. They lied in reporting that facility it's just one of the buildings that was built in 1944, and we're talking about just the West Wing, which mostly houses.
The West Wing of Christus Spahn Memorial Hospital.
Yeah,
Was built
yeah,
in
Christy
44.
Spahn Memorial.
The rest of it is much newer.
Yeah. The eastern, the East Wing, what we call, was built in the late '60s. Anyway, just to correct that, but to move on. Here you have this huge hospital, a single stop, a second level trauma center that served the Vice President of the United States when there was a shooting in hunting accident there in Kennedy County. They want to bring this hospital down and reduce it to a speck in the map of Corpus Christi. And something sounds very suspicious, because here you're going to have a whole ecosystem where you have doctors, businessmen, eateries that rotate. You're going to have
excuse me for interrupting you, but that's a side issue, isn't it? The fact that there are restaurants around there, clinics around there, etc. Isn't that the side issue to primarily the main issue, which is Christus Spahn Memorial was used to provide indigent care?
Well, the other factor, the thing is that the county, what separates, we zoom in on the funds. What makes Christy Spahn Memorial so unique from the other Christy Spahn hospitals? It is that it has public dollars. So the incentives of many of these predatory minds, which I'm going to talk about later in the show, the motive is they're going after public funds, because here Memorial is receiving monies from the county every year for upgrading.
Right.
They can go out for bonds. What is the quickest way if people want to go after public funds? It's through a bond election. And they can utilize the county entity to bring in funds and use those
Well, the
monies
county
at will.
excuse me, say it more simply, the Christus Spahn Memorial has a contract with the county, and the county pays Christus Spahn Memorial to provide indigent care to people, correct?
Yes. There's a contract, a 1986, I believe, or 96 contract. I think Richard Borchard was the county judge at the time, when the hospital district used to own, control, and maintain the structure of Memorial. They basically turned it over to Spahn
Right,
with
it
the
was called-
conditions
excuse me,
that they
excuse me.
would serve the indigent
It was called Memorial
populations.
Hospital, and Memorial Hospital provided indigent care to the poor people. And
And
Christus-
the outlying
and the-
areas, Robstown, Driscoll,
And then,
Agua
and
Dulce,
then
so on and
Christus
so
Spahn
forth.
was given the contract instead in the, whenever that was, 15 years ago or so, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, the
Now,
old,
I would
go
tell
ahead.
you, I did want to put this in, and not meaning to be rude. Under the Texas law, under the Texas Health and Safety Code, section 61.028, every county, I believe it's over 250,000, has to in fact provide indigent care. Now, what's interesting is it's pretty basic services, and the basic services, it just includes things like immunizations, medical screening services, annual physical examinations, etc. But under section 61.029 of the Health and Safety Code, they do not have to provide emergency health care services. They don't have to provide trauma services. So I don't know what your thoughts of this are. Are they going to eliminate Christus Spahn Memorial Hospital and just provide the very basic minimums necessary under the 61.028 of the Texas Health and Safety Code? Is that part of the modus operandi? Have you looked at that?
Well, if we look at corporations and in general, when they serve a certain peak, it's about net gain in the end. And we're starting to see here, remember, this is a Catholic hospital, an international hospital that exists all over the world. We're starting to see not your average priest working with a community out in the field, the true believers. We're starting to see the people that control the bank accounts and the money and the power. And I'm trying to look at, I've been studying the power structure of Corpus and Nueces County for 20 years now. Our newspaper has been around for 20 years, believe it or not. I've been engaged in other, of course, activities in the community throughout the years. And basically, we're starting to see the church play an extremely politicized role. The secular aspect of religion. We look at the Christie Spahn Board, for instance. We saw Edmund Carmody.
Well, he was a former
former previous
Bishop Carmody.
bishop that said what separates Christie Spahn Memorial from all the other hospitals was compassion, and serving the indigent, the compassion in serving the indigent, the immigrants, the various population groups that have been demonized or distanced by certain groups in society. So you would see all these billboards around Corpus. Now we have a new bishop, Stephen Mulvey, and he said what separates Memorial Spahn is hope. We give hope to a lot of the working people, to a lot of the poor, that we have a support system here, a one-place stop where you get sick, you don't have to go out for medicines, right there, a trauma center, a residency center. Now they want to reduce this, and this is basically your question, why would they want to provide only the basic services? Because in the contract, if we look at that 1996 contract where County Judge Borchert made and the commissioners made with the Christie Spahn, it says just to provide indigent care. So the less services to the indigent in the corporate mentality would be higher net gains for the corporation. So but if
Perhaps.
perhaps, but then you're looking right, and you're also talking about destruction, shock and awe. You're talking about transportation of resources from the a level 2 trauma center. It's like
Well,
transport.
one thing you haven't
And
told,
there,
one thing, excuse me, one thing you haven't told the audience about, of course, is they state that they're going to move the trauma center to Christus Bond Shoreline, which, if we point the camera out this window right here, we're at that location. So they want to move the trauma center to Christus Bond Shoreline. Now, a lot
an
of people,
extremely dilapidated hospital, by the way.
well, when the other issue is when was Christus Bond Shoreline built? That's probably, isn't that overall as old as Christus Bond Memorial?
It was built a little bit before the east wing of Memorial, so there's not much different.
But I think they're going to tear. There's ambiguity in the plan because they say that Christus Bond Shoreline, they're going to be tearing down 2 buildings there. So it sounds like they're going to tear down Christus Bond Shoreline also. There's only 3 old buildings.
There is, they don't have the parking. That's one. I'm sure they'll fix it as they go along. It's an enormous project. It's like transporting a factory from the center of Corpus to point B overnight. They're saying it's a point of urgency. They're trying to destroy a 300-bed facility. I spoke to John Heaps yesterday. He's with the hospital district. He's pretty much in their corner. He works for the county. The county gives him the county dollars. He thus provides and deals with his CEO and the Spawn Memorial, Spawn Hospital CEO. And anyway, but right in the center of Spawn, we see a man by the name of L. Jones, who in the last few elections we've seen try to that Operation Bayfront. We saw him at the head of the helm.
Yes, that was a part.
He sits right there on the board with Stephen Theo Claybert from the Claybert Bank, whose father, I think, was a law partner with Hayden Head Sr. We see the co-optation of Dr. Hector P. Garcia's family, like Barbara Canales Black and Patricia, which formerly served at the board. Now I think Barbara, Patricia Canales Bell, I think is her name, married to an attorney, right? She's an attorney herself.
I'm not an expert
her
on
sister
attorneys.
now is going to serve.
I'm not an expert on attorneys, man.
But here you say, we have an Hispanic on the board. We have Barbara Canales Black, where Barbara Canales Black has never lived in the West Side. She lives in Hewitt Drive. She was part of a
For people who are watching this stuff, internationally, the West Side of Corpus, you're saying, is basically an older part of the town where many Hispanics, Mexican Americans live. Is that what you're saying?
I think
she lives in you're saying that
we're talking about a low-income neighborhood. Sometimes barrios are equated with ghettos, so on and so forth.
I think the technical phrase for ghetto really means a place where one certain ethnic group is located.
Yes,
I don't think it necessarily connotes poverty.
But culturally, it does, and in South Texas, it does.
Okay.
I think culturally,
So the West Side. What
like
would you refer to?
The wouldn't necessarily.
What do you refer to the West Side? You say this is
basically,
is this a ghetto?
and the West Side.
Poor area of town. What is it?
Well, basically, in the West Side, you have the highest concentration of poor Hispanics in Nueces County.
And Christus Bond Memorial Hospital.
We're talking about Nueces County, not just
Christus Bond
Corpus
Memorial
Christi.
Hospital has been serving that group. Is that right?
Well, the reason Christy Spawn was given the contract was because Corpus Christi, remember the early days of segregation, even Memorial used to, when they opened in after World War II, used to segregate Hispanics. Hispanics were treated in the hallways, by the way. Dr. Hector P. Garcia was really brought in because many of the German American doctors would not serve the Hispanic community.
Dr.
But
Hec-
that's a
wait,
side
wait a minute,
issue.
Dr. Hector P. Garcia, and actually
The founder of
when I
the
started my
American GI
practice
Forum.
here,
Yeah.
he was actually still seeing people at a free clinic on a
Yes.
part-time basis,
Yes.
and that they want to name the new facility that's going to replace Christus Bond Memorial Hospital. They want to rename it the Hector P. Garcia Clinic. So that's pretty good,
Yeah,
huh?
well,
You like
can you
that?
can you
I'm just
imagine a whole structure being reduced to a little a dot in the map of Corpus Christi? It sort of deflates. It sort of destroys the psychology of the enormous strides that Hispanics fought for the West Side to elevate when they had been ignored, when they were trying to come out from a dark period of segregation, from a dark period of not having the contracts, trying to humanize the institutions of Corpus Christi. But remember, this is the heartland of Catholicism. 99.9 of these Hispanics were Catholic. So
I don't think it's that high.
Where
It's real
is-
high, but I don't think
well,
it's quite
well,
that high.
at that point in time, it was.
I would believe
Historically,
that. I would believe that, yeah.
historically, what we're starting to see now, and I think there's a great deal of disenchantment with the Catholic Church that is making many Hispanics turn away because we see the religious leader himself, the bishop, hanging around L. Jones, and we're talking basically a political boss in Corpus Christi that controls the public funds. If you control the money, you control the city, you control the world.
But when you say hanging around, what do you mean hanging around?
Well,
Go and have-
what we're
go and have
start.
coffee and
What do I mean by hanging
sandwich,
around?
bologna sandwich.
Look at the movements. Look at the movements. We see L. Jones and his group trying to develop in a very congested area. We have Whataburger Field. They push for American Bank Center. Remember, he's the president, the CEO of American Bank. Here you have using public funds to build the American Bank Center, Whataburger Field, all their friends, Brewster Street. Then we see Spahn. We see the Spahn Corporation now bringing him an expert at going after public funds. The main guy that is masterminding a lot of this Operation Bayfront, and it's sort of an ecosystem for me. There's a power structure in Corpus Christi, and people have to wake up. The movement that we see Christy Spahn is doing is they want a total monopoly on health care. They want a total monopoly on those dollars that are given for indigent health and to Memorial. They want to move all those resources now, siphon everything out of the heart, the middle, the center, the concentrated area of the West Side into a highly congested area like Shoreline, where they want to place the trauma center. Can you imagine if somebody's bleeding, head trauma, time
Yeah.
to
What-
treatment is critical.
What many
10
peop-
minutes will take your life. This is an act of violence.
What-
How can it not be an act of violence to overnight close down a facility where people are barely hanging on to life, where you have thousands, hundreds of people with various very serious illnesses, and just shutting down their basically their oxygen tanks? You know?
Well, and for the people that aren't local who are nice enough to watch the show or interested enough in a certain community to watch the show, Christus Bond Shoreline Hospital is actually on a shoreline, and the access to the hospital is rather limited. In other words, there is no expressway, there is no highway to give you access. Where in Christus Bond Memorial Hospital, it is a lot closer to major arteries to give accessibility, and a lot closer to the middle of even though it's only a mile and a half away, it's a lot closer to the center of the city. It's not at the end of the city like Christus Bond Shoreline, where they want to relocate the facilities for the indigent. Isn't that one of the issues, Homer?
Yes, one of the issues. it is better explained. The fairgrounds in Robstown, which is in the rural areas, many people now are starting to use the Robstown Fairgrounds because you can enter from north, south, east, west. But the American Bank Center, the way it's situated, way in a corner, in sort of a very restricted area, the flow of traffic is extremely, so it's like being in Houston, in Dallas,
So the
at
implication
5
is
o'clock noon.
the implication is the American Bank Center, like Christus Spine Shoreline, is being located to those areas.
It is
not for not for
a dangerous location. This affects, if it affects the center of Corpus Christi, it affects the south side, it affects the north side, it affects everybody that finds themselves in this turf when they're sick.
well, and the implication is the American Bank Center and the tearing down of this relies at part of the earlier eve of destruction tour of the city of Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
They actually tore down the Memorial Coliseum.
Yes, and basically what we're starting to see is the consequences of destroying an infrastructure. First of all, to dispel some of the myths.
And that was another structure that was another structure they decided not to sell. I don't know, maybe there was a legal reason they couldn't sell it. But again, this was another major structure. We're not going to sell it. We're going to tear it down and the implication was not to give competition to the American Bank Center, which there were certain vested interests.
Yeah.
You're stating,
just
correct?
think about it. Why would they tear down a multi-million-dollar facility? I mean, crumble. I mean, destroy to smithereens. Why wouldn't they leave the memorial's hospital structure in place, as well as the clinic? The little clinic, which, by the way, is not going to be just doctors. Now you're going to have doctors' assistants treating the indigent. They're no longer going to have the residency center there of real doctors serving the poor. It's sort of going to be like the clinic they open in the West Side, the clinic they open in Robstown, where the people don't get their medicines on time, where a doctor only comes in once a week, so why wouldn't they leave the Memorial Hospital structure there and just sell it? And I think that's one point.
Well, it might be that they can't sell it.
Well,
but I thought of something funny. Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny they called it Memorial Hospital and Memorial Coliseum? I'm thinking to myself, boy, those aren't the greatest memorials. They're the way they tear them down.
The former CEO Bruce Holstein of Memorial, before Ms. Pam Robinson was brought in, he brought up, we were at Landry's discussing the strategic plan for Memorial, and he hired my marketing company just to provide some input. It was Royal House Marketing, by the way. I'm involved with a marketing firm.
A little plug for Homer's.
That we
little
have.
plug there. I'm just teasing.
Anyway, I do engage in other activities, but
Me too. I'll be cutting the grass.
Subconsciously, as we were there enjoying the seafood and the nice weather, he said, "You know what? We're talking about Spawn and how the treatment, how the results that they get, that the nurses, the doctors are more acclimated to dealing with the indigent, and how well." When he visited the other sites, he said there seems to be too much social distance between some of the staff and in dealing with street people and poor people and people of different cross-cultural backgrounds. In lip service, he said, "I think if one facility needs to be torn down, it's
Shoreline.
Shoreline Hospital."
Well, that would make more sense. You know why that would make more sense?
He says there's structural. There's structural fatigue. That was the word he used.
Well, they are going to tear it down. I think they are going to tear it down.
Well,
Shoreline.
there is structural fatigue. No, they actually want to build. They want, this is the
Well,
logic.
they're gonna tear down 2 buildings. There's only 3 buildings.
Yes. This is the logic. They want to move the trauma center down there overnight, which is going to cause devastation. Um, this is the thing. They want to open a 200-bed facility along shoreline. I think the exit ramp of 35, somewhere around that area, near American Bank. They're trying to, it's going to be a 200-bed facility. I spoke to Johnny Hibbs of the hospital district yesterday, and he said it's going to cost, they're trying to go out for a bond election, trying to convince the commissioners, and for $400 million. And I told him, that, you know, pretty much the guy's going to end up with a contract. Guess who it is? The guy that sits in the hospital board, American Bank. Guess how much the taxpayers are going to pay in interest? It's going to be $800 million. So you're talking about within 20 years. We're talking about $400 million going to L. Jones, the CEO of American Bank. So here you have Christie Spawn and American Bank in bed together. And you're talking about both centered in the same geographical area. We're talking about yesterday the CEO of the hospital district, Johnny Habs, he said, got all excited what he was talking about, and he pretty much supports the power structure in their campaign. He's saying it's too old and blah blah blah.
Okay.
But the one thing he said, I'm right in the middle of medicine. 3 words he used: wealth and power. What do those words tell you, ladies and gentlemen?
Well, let me. That's interesting, and it does tell you a lot. But I wanted to state that it was obvious that if any of the hospitals should be torn down and the property sold, it should be Christie Spawn Shoreline. For the main reason is the property is on shoreline. It's more desirable for. It's more in the city planning structure for tourists and diversity of things. Number 2. And number 3, it's worth a lot more money. The land is worth a lot of money. The land where Christie Spawn Memorial is not worth a lot of money. So that would be the one that should be torn down.
Where would you have a quicker chance of reaching a hospital?
Well, and then obviously
there's
the Christie
people
Spawn Memorial is more in
dying
the center.
before they get to. A lot of people die on their way to.
Well, they
Florida
have the
Hospital.
Halo flight deal. You know, they say that Halo flight. I
Well-
think they're going to expand the Halo flight.
Well,
landing pad.
the main Halo flight is Memorial. They're trying to alter that also, but you're talking about a whole county. Here you're gonna just think of the consequences. It's like throwing a rock in the water. You see ripples. You don't know what's gonna happen. But if you have an ecosystem that has existed like Memorial Hospital, you have businessmen that their entire life savings, they open businesses there. You have eye doctors, heart surgeons. They have a respiratory clinic, people that doctors, neurologists that opened the Bonilla Plaza, invested millions.
Okay.
So you're going to have people losing their jobs, losing their homes, losing their businesses, a whole ecosystem. Remember, what is the logic in any community? You go into the community, do you let an outside expert, an outside corporation tell them, what are your needs? No. The people themselves in a democracy determine what their health issues are, what their needs are in that community. In this case, you don't bring somebody that doesn't know your community, that doesn't know what has emotional weight for your family and the survival.
So the outside expert
of your
doesn't know the
That is
details
what's
on the
being
community.
done.
They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the knowledge to make intelligent decisions oftentimes.
But we
because they're-
reached a point that American Bank has reached so much power. They just reported, L. Jones reported to an Austin newspaper that an independent bank, we're talking about, L. Jones came to Corpus Christi in 1970 when we had the old political boss, Hayden Head, very charismatic. Hayden Head controlled the money. Hayden Head made the deals. Here you had the huge corporations coming to him working together to muster power. But then all of a sudden, boom! In the '80s, he had a plane accident in Crystal City and passed away. So L. Jones pretty much became the head of the helm. But he reports $900 million in assets. This is an American bank that has pretty much. Can you remember? You got to keep this in mind. I've interviewed hundreds of city councilmen, the politicians involved in the city council and city councilmen that have pointed out during L. Jones' reign, if you wanted to win for office, they had a war chest of money. You had 90% of a chance of getting elected.
Okay, so during his reign, you mean during the time that this man that you're referring to, and what is his position with the bank?
Well, Hayden had started the movement. He was pretty much a political. If you went to him, Hilda Tagle went to him.
But I'd like an answer.
He was a lawyer.
Jones now? Who is Al Jones?
Al Jones is the CEO of American Bank. He also sits on the board.
And you believe...
He's been the president of the hospital district. I surmise, I postulate, I've said this over the years, that pretty much is he going to... Why should he have inside information? The public cannot be informed about public dollars, yet he sits on the board that's going to do business with him in going out for bonds for $400 million. That is clearly unethical. That's malfeasance of office. We can go on and so on and so forth.
You think sometimes powerful, influential people with economic interests shouldn't sit on some of these boards, because what's happening is they're benefiting by whatever citizen tax money sometimes. Is that right?
Of course, they're not being held accountable. But keep in mind that as a Catholic, I do have a bishop in the family that's now retired, Bishop Raimundo Peña, one of the first bishops that was made bishop from this area, from Robstown, Texas. My grandpa built the first rural Catholic church, St. Anthony's in Robstown, La Misión de San Antonio, as it was known, Antonio Peña. I grew up every Saturday. I used to have caldo or Mexican soup with the bishop.
Okay.
You know.
Yes, sir. So
I grew up in a Catholic environment where several of my family are non-blood. I just want to point out that this is the secular part of the church, where it's become more political than spiritual. We're starting to see marketing company. We're starting to see a bishop. We're starting to see Bishop Mulvey that is so removed from the Hispanic community, so removed from the poor, and he's saying, "Yeah, I'm about hope. I'm about standing in front of my people and meeting their needs, what carries emotional weight and spiritual weight."
Let me say something on the side of the church. Excuse me for interrupting you. You know, you have to have wisdom to help the poor. You have to have experience and training, or you could make the problem worse. You know, I've known people before who've adopted special needs children or something with the best of hearts, and the truth of the matter is they didn't have the qualifications to help them. And I mean, I think you would agree that I'll tell you something, just anecdotally. Yeah. I've told my clients before, because I do Social Security disability, when they got a clinic card at Christus Spahn Memorial, I told them that was the best medical care treatment that I knew that you could get. They would give them MRIs, they would give them X-rays. I think they would ordinarily pay $5 for a prescription, and it was all there. So that's been provided for many years. If you got that clinic card, again, I think that was better than any medical care I could purchase through a private company.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that I don't know if they're trying to get away from that. Is that possible?
Well, the movement,
I don't know.
The movement that I've been seeing, and I'm not just saying this overnight. I've been saying this since I was in 1440 Keys, a conservative radio station that I didn't ask for the job. They came knocking at my door to join one of a very prestigious conservative radio station that invited me to be part of it with my colleague
Yes,
L.
sir.
Jones, the morning show.
Bob Jones.
Yeah, Bob Jones. Excuse me. Before that, they had Jim Lago, I think, on the morning show.
Yes, he left that station, and then Mr. Jones
You know,
took it
I
over.
wasn't a Republican. I wasn't. I'm more of an independent.
Okay, so, yes, sir.
You know, so over the years, I've shared this research because one of the questions, one of the reoccurring themes was, who controls Corpus Christi? Why is all this stuff being concentrated where American Bank Center is? Why is all this stuff being concentrated in an area that was filled with chemicals, like Brewster Street is sitting on I'm saying that area is contaminated. I think they used the Port Commission dollars to remove some of those dangerous chemicals. Why are those movements occurring? What was the north side torn down and totally demolished overnight? They were trying to drill a hole because of the congestion that occurs in that corner of where Whataburger Field is. Now they're trying to find an exit so to get rid of some of the traffic. They're trying to find who gave them eminent domains to come in the name of, now they're using urban renewal or clean communities to come and destroy our ecosystem and way of life, everything that we hold dear and decent, where our families survive.
Well, let me say this, though. Maybe the plots to destroy the poor, to harm the poor, aren't as definitive as what we would think, because don't they intend to give away, don't they have a plot to destroy 22 or 24 parks?
Exactly.
And put up reasonably priced housing? Isn't that for the
less help to the indigent equates to more net gains for the corporation. Now we're starting to see public lands like the parks being targeted where there's enormous grants. Here you have a huge amount of monies being channeled to the Economic Development Corporation. These people are paid enormous salaries, $500,000 here, $500,000 there, to support the EDC, so on and so forth. I understand that American Bank developed, one of the administrators there formed a nonprofit corporation. And the city council, I think it was a few years, less than a handful of years, gave them a park along the bayfront shoreline area. So here they're finding creative ways of acquiring public land. If we go around the city, and we're starting to see the public parks being targeted. And I think you had an experience that you shared with me, Mark, didn't you, in reference to a public park near your area?
Well, actually, my mother lives across the street from one of these parks, that they're asserting these parks asserting that they are eliminating the parks that aren't frequently used. But I could state on personal experience that park, that Ridgewood Park, is very, very heavily used. In particular, around 4 to 6 o'clock when I would go visit her and often eat at my mother's home. So I know that park is very busy, and I tell you what happened. There was another park several blocks from there that was being used, and they put in a children's playground in the center of that park. So all the soccer players, etc., moved to my mother's park, which was called Ridgewood Park. Now, obviously, what's going to occur if that park, very heavily used park, is taken, decommissioned, according to City Councilwoman Colleen McIntyre, and sold for reasonably priced housing and an incentive given to developers, obviously what's going to happen is everything in that park is going to have to move to another park. So that park is even going to be more crowded.
That is terrible.
Well, the interesting thing is if they were going to take these parks with good purpose, and to me, and state that we're going to use them for reasonably priced housing, like they really care about reasonably priced housing, according to you, they've torn down all the reasonably priced housing.
Oh, yeah.
But so whatever. If they're
Well,
really
here
going to do that,
around,
why don't they?
I was noticing here around your law office, and you're located close to Christie's
Shoreline,
Yeah.
Shoreline
We're
Hospital.
starting to see a lot of the buildings being demolished. You know, also there's we're starting to see public lands. We're starting to see a whole. We're starting to see a huge wave of people joining forces, consolidating power, and basically what you seen in Corpus Christi is in the memorial issue, and it's all about going after public dollars.
Yes,
What
you
ma-
know,
what
you know what's
made
interesting. What's interesting about that? About the public dollars argument. The right wing talks about that as if that's a form of capitalism. I don't think it is.
no.
If they wanted to, if they were wanted to, true capitalism to me is you're on the free enterprise market. They have refined a form of capitalism to get public money
That was
primarily.
one of the questions the newspaper in Austin asked L. Jones, and I'll share it with you. They asked him, how does American Bank, an independent bank, survive? Remember, they reported $900 million in assets amidst an economy that is very shaky, you know? And the way they survive is through public dollars. They sit people in. He sits on several entities where they're able and have inside information. They keep the general public in the dark when public dollars are involved. They lock people that get informed into a contract. How do you call it? Contract where they don't release information. You're a lawyer, Mark. They lock them into.
Well, there's I don't know what you're referring to.
But basically, they log into a confidentiality agreement contract where they're not able to talk to anybody. So they pretty much create monopolies. And they were very suspicious. The newspaper said, "How do you survive in any?" Because they're public dollars.
And I think
They're not in the free market competing like everybody else.
It would seem like the major new destructive. I think the destruction of the two Columbus fleet ships are related to that too.
Oh yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Did they say we're going to sell the Columbus ships? I mean, maybe, who knows? Maybe somebody eccentric would have bought one for $100,000, said I'll make it into a house, or I'm going to. No. We city council, we're going to destroy them, and they're going to build some sort of a pavilion on the slab that was used to display them. And I almost think, I think conspiratorially oftentimes. I'm wondering if this was it. They allowed them to rot. They said, "Oh, they're rotten." Well, did you try painting them?
That was clearly the case.
I mean, yeah, they're rotten.
It's not what's
If you don't treat
real.
them-
It's what they make you to perceive that's real. It's all manipulation, Mark. But when you control everything and you have everything, you got your nice home. American Bank now, by the way, is expanding. They opened a new office in Austin. They're trying to acquire new monies because I believe or surmise, postulate, let the court hear all that. They're trying to open a new bank in San Antonio. Go into the internet, research it. So what do people do? Here you have L. Jones, came to Corpus Christi in 1970, met Hayden Head, tried to be a Hayden Head. Of course, Hayden Head was very charismatic, extremely intelligent, a whiz when it came to politics. Recruited even Hispanics after a while, like Salomon Ortiz, made him a congressman, I believe, sheriff, to serve
That's
certain
the way I
agendas
understand.
at some point. Helped several. But let me make one point. What do you want after you start controlling, like Christy Spahn, that control, and the bishops moving back and playing a passive role, preaching hope when they're targeting the indigent, they're targeting the Bible says what, if you do it to the least of me, you do it unto me. How come that Sermon on the Mount is being ignored at this point in time, and they're allowing the callous, cold, insensitive agenda of a Catholic hospital to target the poor, to target
Well-
the weakest, the disenfranchised.
Well, okay,
A
but their
Catholic
argument-
community,
yes, but wait a
mostly
minute,
a
wait a minute.
Catholic community.
I think they would argue that they're not doing that. You think it's obvious they're doing that. They're saying, oh, well, this new clinic is a $400 million gift to the city.
Mark, it is it's straight to the bishop, and I'll say it one-on-one, and I might be wrong. Some people might disagree with me. But to Mulvey, my message to Mulvey is,
Bishop
Bishop
Mulvey.
Mulvey, with all due respect, I know that you get to decide how Christy Spawn is marketed to the people. This is a Catholic community, the most concentrated area of Catholics. By just moving the hospital to Shoreline, where people are like sardines, it is an act of violence. You're going to see several in our community die who are profoundly sick. And I think you should read the scripture, and I'll pray for you that you see beyond the forest of bank accounts, beyond the forest of vested interests, the harping of L. Jones and the dream of total domination of Christy Spawn over this area. And you see, and give the people, if you say hope is the word, is the marketing word, we see a dark tunnel. Let us see a little bit of light, Bishop Marvey, for our community.
Well, but is Bishop, excuse me for interrupting you, but is Bishop Mulvey the only, are you stating that he has to okay?
I think it's time. I think if you have a large Catholic community, he is our spiritual area, our spiritual leader in the area. He's supposed to place himself ahead of the helm. What Bishop Mulvey has been doing is saying, I am against abortion. I'm leading the anti-abortion movement. And I am also disenchanted with that because it has become a political weapon. And I'm disenchanted with the way and to telling the Hispanic community, vote Republican because you're pro-life. Vote this particular way to serve an agenda that is really social Darwinism, where only the fittest survive, an agenda that we see it in Memorial, a total destruction, a one health stop, an ecosystem.
And by social
starting
Darwinism,
to see.
what do you mean?
Social Darwinism is a philosophy that if the weaker die or are wiped out of the resources, you create a better community. It's better to invest your resources on the people that are more likely to succeed and survive in society. This is clearly a social Darwinistic movement by a corporation that is justifying it through net gains. I am very disenchanted at this point in time how politicized and how the Catholic Church recently joined with groups like Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse. The reason maybe being because of the pedophile scandals with CP&L, with corporations that held Gonzalo Sandoval, who was the CEO of CP&L here for a while, and others during the 80s. Mike Scott, who brought us the tort reform movements, because I understand that the doctors need to be protected, but what happens when you cut off the oxygen to people that are barely hanging on in a society that that is just so
Mr. John M. Stafford, who runs the Nueces County Democratic Party website, identified him as a Southside resident, said according to Corpus Christi Caller-Times article something cogent. It seems to me that Spawn is trying to close down the competition at Memorial and take all the profitable business over to the Shoreline campus. Do you think there's any legitimacy in that statement?
I'll repeat it again, Mark. Make sure that
Spawn is trying to close down the competition at Memorial and take all the profitable business over to the Shoreline campus. Is
I
that
think
true?
it's they're trying to remember there's we're talking about what separates Memorial from other hospitals. It's public dollars. The commissioner's court every year gives them money. They're able to use the commissioner court to go out for bonds to serve the indigent. So they're not just wiping out Memorial, they're wiping out all competition in the United States. Why can we go out? We should start recruiting other hospitals that can provide the same service or a better service to the indigent, which I'm already talking to one of the entities that can provide this, and they're saying we can do a much better job than Christie Spawn in serving the indigent. And I think
can
it's
do a better job?
And I'm going to give you a whole list of the competitors out there that are saying they can do a much better job in serving the indigent, and not only Corpus Christi. Remember, we're talking about the rural areas like Robstown, Driscoll.
Well, they
that
haven't-
need to get to the hospital on time.
But they do have clinics. Christus Spawn does have clinics in those areas, correct?
They do have most of them are treated by nurses or help out. But what do you do in case of a trauma? What do you do in case of a? They have no psychiatric clinics.
One
They
thing,
have
one thing
no-
I did note that the
to
the
make
state
it.
of Texas-
Let me just real
I
clear
mean,
in Robstown, it takes more than almost 3 months to get an appointment with a doctor at a clinic, and when you show up, usually a doctor in Robstown or the West Side does not see you. Only a nurse that is what they call a physician assistant, which has misdiagnosed many
But
people.
years ago, they didn't even have those clinics. Those clinics are new. They didn't have a
Well,
Christus
the
Spawn
reason we're
Robstown
starting
clinic.
to see
They
this
didn't have a
movement
Christus
is
Spawn
because
Alice clinic.
they're preparing for a larger agenda, and that is the net gains, the returns at the end of the year. So they're providing less services to the indigent just to meet that contract where the county under Richard Borchard as county judge in 1996 was to serve the indigent. So they're trying to do the very minimum to meet that requirement, yet procure millions.
Well, I'm not disagreeing. I don't know, but I do know that they didn't have those clinics years ago, and I was suspicious of those clinics. In all honesty, I'm wondering what I am a little bit disappointed in is the Christus Spawn monopoly, Christus Spawn Shoreline, Christus Spawn South, Christus Spawn Memorial, and all the various clinics. I've got to think that competition, and I think that we've had a problem in this area with the HEB monopolies, the Christus Spawn monopolies, and until recently when they were sold with the Villarreal monopolies. And these monopolies, I think, have helped the entirety of the area back. Is that right?
I think it's inexcusable this recent movement by L. Jones on the hospital board, and the bishop, and the Theo Clayburg of the King Ranch, Barbara Canales Black, agreeing to this destruction. I think it's time that we start looking at other avenues for our very own survival. If our own bishop will not step and place himself at the helm of the needs of the Catholic community, if you do this to the least of my brethren, the Lord says in the Sermon on the Mount, you do it unto me. If that spiritual culture is not there anymore, then the people themselves have a right to take it upon themselves for the survival of their families, for the integrity of their community and their identity, to find a solution.
All right,
and
well,
I think it's time.
I don't know. I think we're running close to the end of our show now because we've had some, and I appreciate the patience of whoever's watching this show. I've had some production problems for the last year, so God willing, the show is audible, etc. Was there anything in conclusion that you wanted to state? You said the people themselves. I don't know that the people themselves have the rights that they think they have. I don't know that they have the access to the system that they think they have. And I don't know that just voting for one politician or another, I do vote, and I think you should vote, but in all honesty, I think the effects that you could have through voting are pretty limited. Wouldn't you agree? And what would you have the people do?
I think that the psychology was high in Operation Bayfront. I think that this show today is going to mobilize an enormous base of people around this particular issue because it's a collective concern. I feel the bishop, as a spiritual leader, I call to his true believer not to displace his calling when he joined the priesthood and later moved up in the upward mobility in the church, to exorcise, bring in an exorcist and remove the L. Joneses
I would say that
from those commissions. Remove those types of social Darwinisms that are hurting our community. I think this affects, it's a symbiotic relationship. I remember the old school days when I was in the little schools.
Finish up.
At the end of the year, real quick.
And you're yelling into that microphone.
The
I'm afraid,
old
Homer.
schoolhouse. We had the teacher at the end of the year being reviewed by
Yes,
the
sir.
parents. Did she do a good job? Would put on a show for the community. And if she failed, she was fired. They brought up somebody else. And that's what I'm talking about. Accountability, transparency. It has not been there, but it is an act of violence.
Okay.
We're going to see a community
Thank you.
harmed.
Thank you very much for coming on, Homer Villarreal. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. Good night.